Good afternoon and welcome to TalkSports. It is our weekend program, which we also call our Saturday Sports Special. Well, as indicated, we will have with us, and hopefully shortly, the Prime Minister of Grenada, Honorable Dickon Mitchell. The Prime Minister is joining us. It will be his second time. The last time was 15 months ago, and he will be joining us to talk about sports. Yes, it's always a pleasure having the Prime Minister to give his vision, his perspective on the development of sports in Grenada. And no doubt it will be an honor to have the Prime Minister when he joins us momentarily. And as usual, my co-host, who is in Toronto, that's Rudy and Sylvan, and he's also standing by as soon as the Prime Minister comes in. So before Rudian, before the Prime Minister chimes in, welcome back, and I'm certain you had a very good time on your birthday.
It's good to see you again, and to the listeners, it's a pleasure to have you guys with us one more time. Yes, I certainly did. Had a splendorous time on my birthday. Just went out of town for a few days. It's always good, to take a
Mhm,
little break from the city.
mhm.
Um, but everywhere we go in this part of the world is snow right now,
Right.
especially in Canada. So, most definitely it was a snowy one, but a good one.
Okay. I'm just seeing there that the message is that he's joining us shortly. So before the Prime Minister joins, what you hoping to hear from the Prime Minister?
I just really want to hope to get a clear pathway of sports for sure, especially in the category of the youths, of the vision that he and his administration have for the youths for the next few years. He have in that he will be in power and maybe beyond that. I think he definitely had the potential to be there for a next term, and hopefully, if that's the case, this term in sports, so could lead a pathway for the next term and the future of youth sports in Grenada. I
Yeah,
think it's
well,
really needed for sure, and I think that's where once we can control one part, everything else can fall in place. And I think you have to start with the
mhm.
youth development in sports, and
Yeah, well,
especially in the grassroots.
yeah, well, I think the main theme
Yeah,
for our discussion has to do with
yeah,
the development of sports, especially at the grassroots level. And I'm certain that he will bring some insights into the thinking of his government, even though
yeah.
we hoping to have the sports minister at some point later on. Okay. I'm talking about as he gets himself acclimatized in the ministry, right?
Yeah,
He will have to be briefed at all levels and things like that. So I'm certainly that we'll get an overview of of the direction of sports from the Prime Minister, since he is the leader of government. Okay. So certainly we're looking forward to that. Any other thing in particular, Rudian?
and just maybe getting something on the sports policy that's it's about to put in place, that for a lot of the veterans in the athletes, the Olympians and the world champions, and what's in place for them, what's are in store for them, um, what is the incentive for athletes representing Grenada, stuff like that. It motivate athletes to want to compete, motivate athletes to want to wear the Grenada colors. That when they're done compete, there is something for them. It's also something I would like to know, even though may not be in his part to know everything right away, but hopefully that there is some incentive for Grenadian athletes to represent Grenada.
Yeah. So I got all of that, Rudian. Thank you very much. And I think the Prime Minister is now joining us. I was just trying to get a little brief before he gets on, because certainly there are a number of things I need to get from the Prime Minister. So let's welcome the Prime Minister to our program for the second time, I should say, and wishing the Prime Minister, first of all, a Happy New Year to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be on the program, and let me say Happy New Year to you, your family, and all of your guests who may be on, as well as your listeners.
Right. Thank you very much. And I know, Prime Minister, first, let me thank you for appearing on the program. And we were discussing it previously in that it's, as Prime Minister, it's always a burdensome for you, and I'm happy that you can join us to answer just a few questions, and probably what you can answer in the ambit, and specifically because there's a new sports minister, and that I'm certain sports minister will get a time to acclimatize himself, and then probably in a position to answer some of our questions. But certainly from a government perspective in particular, that's what I'm trying to get. You have been the head of government for, from the start, I should say. So certainly there will be certain things that you will be able to give us in terms of your insights, your perspectives, even things in your constituency, which probably be reflective in other communities as well. So I want to thank you, first of all, for being part of the program. But as usual, when you were on the program 15 months ago, our icebreaker had to do with a little hoops, a little basketball. So, unfortunately, I don't have something to show the viewers this time around with the Prime Minister doing a little hoops and thing. But let me just ask you one question as an icebreaker.
Well, maybe you're focusing on North American sport because of where you are.
No.
Football and other things in this part of the world. So there should be some photos of me attempting to play cricket. So
okay, well, right. I think that's some community cricket. But more on a personal side. So the father of Grenada's independence was an avid cricketer and fan. Your predecessor also, an avid cricketer. What's your favorite sports? And well, you just probably put it in some way or the other. And will we see one day, you don in sporting gear to compete in your favorite sport? So you tell me, or you tell us, what's your favorite sport?
No, I think my favorite sport is still cricket. I think if you grew up, when I grew up, it would be hard not to have cricket as your favorite sport. So despite the challenges of the West Indies cricket team, and despite, in a sense, the decline of, I think, cricket generally in the West Indies, it is still, I think, certainly the favorite pastime for me.
Right. I'm happy with that. And certainly it gives us an idea of how we can, fashion our discussion, because it seems as if you're more so concerned and purposely with the community and grassroots. And it's something, as we were saying in the start of the program, we want to spend some time on in the development. Because when you were on the program the last time, you spent quite a bit dealing with that aspect of the grassroots community sports. And to an extent, we've seen some of that community spirit coming back, because you yourself, we saw photos and videos of over the past few weeks being involved in the communities and things like that. So we've seen that community spirit. Is it something you're hoping that can transform into sports as itself?
No, well, absolutely. I think to a large extent, the community spirit, one obvious tool for creating community spirit is, in fact, sport. So our emphasis really is on ensuring that the community activities include sport, and not just football or soccer or track. But also looking at, in a sense, non-traditional sport that we overlook. Swimming, for instance, is a major one that we are trying to ensure throughout the length and breadth of Grenada, particularly in the rural communities, that we can give support to the volunteers, to the Ministry of Sports, and to all of the other persons who are assisting and ensuring that more and more Grenadians learn to swim. And that must take place at the community level and in schools. That's critical. The earlier people learn to engage in some of those activities, the better. Things like basketball, tennis is another area that we want to give specific focus to. Most of the tennis courts are located in St. George, And obviously you need a flat area to have a tennis court. But we believe there are some sites in St. Andrews that can certainly look at having tennis courts. So we are looking to explore those. We are also looking to see how we can ensure that we can retrofit some of the basketball courts so that they can double both as tennis courts and as basketball courts. So ensuring that we can repair the facilities. And if you drive around, you will notice that we've been tackling this systematically. You can look in St. George and you can see the renovation of the courts. You can see work being done on playing fields. If you go to St. David, you can see the same thing as well. If you go to St. Andrew and so on, you can see that. So significant work is being done on ensuring that the communities have places where persons can play sport. But we just don't want to keep it to the traditional areas. We want to ensure that we can expand and look at new areas of sport as well, or less traditional areas of sport.
Right, and that is in addition to that, we also see an increase in the number of lighted playing fields nationwide. So that is actually complementing. But what advice would you have for the administrators of sports, local sports administrators? Because government is playing its part in providing and maintaining, upgrading, etc. But what advice would you have for those local sports administrators regarding the use of the facilities, and even for broader physical education as a prelude to health and wellness?
Well, I think for me, I don't know if it's advice, but my first recommendation is that, in fact, I think sport administrators need to focus on grassroots sports, particularly at the primary and secondary schools. There's really no point in my view in focusing on a university if you have no primary school or secondary schools. And to a large extent, the individual athletes who become stars internationally in Grenada have done so in many instances without any sort of significant infrastructure support from anyone, whether it's the government or in a sense, sport administrators. So I think if we really want to get to the point where we can start talking semi-professional or professional sport, we absolutely have to focus on grassroots sports, because you need large numbers of people playing, and the playing has to become a norm, a routine part of their daily lives, if we are going to get the talent that then becomes semi-professional or professional. So whether it's football, whether it's the Olympic Association, whether it's the Swimming Association, we really need to make sure that we have strong clubs, that everyone in the primary and secondary schools are in fact playing sports. And so I think the collaboration should really be with the Ministry of Education in ensuring that they can help support the Ministry of Education, whether it's with volunteers, whether it's with gears, whether it's with technical know-how coaches, to make sure that systematically throughout the villages and our communities that we can utilize the facilities that we have now, particularly given that most fields are lit. So it means we don't have to be there at 2 or 3 in the afternoon when the sun is out and perhaps not the most convenient time. But we can go later on in the evening and have the families come out, have parents support their children, have grandparents support their children, have friends and neighbors support the kids. And I think once the kids have that support, you would see that they will excel and do well. So I still think there's a significant underutilization of our sporting facilities, notwithstanding that they're being lit, because there isn't enough organization and structure at the community and the grassroots level in terms of how we tackle sports. So I mean, I could pick cricket as a random example. There's very little cricket being played in Grenada in an organized or structured way. Very little cricket clubs, very little cricket being done at the parish level. I could pick St. David as an example. To a large extent, the persons who have really contributed to cricket and have sort of kept cricket alive in St. David's, people like Ray Duncan, have done so single-handedly, outside of, to a large extent, the formal structured approach, with very little support, in a sense, from the national cricket architecture. So we really have to, in a sense, go back to some of those persons who've given their lives to these sort of sports, and really encourage them and resource them and support them to make sure that they can build, in a sense, the next generation of cricketers, the next generation of sports administrators, to make sure that we can be successful. I'm not hearing you, Michael, if you're asking me any further questions.
Seems like he's on the mute side, sir. Happy New Year to you, sir.
All right, thank you, Rudion.
So let me, if I may ask, okay, Michael is back.
Yeah, no, I was listening to the Prime Minister there, but I thought it was interesting because I think he made mention of St. David's in particular, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, is Pastor Stevenson Worm, who on the program last week referred to cricket in St. David's, in the parish in particular. And he says if cricket is not vibrant in the parish of St. David, then we have a problem in Grenada. And to an extent, he said St. Andrews too, you know.
Yeah.
But so I'm glad you mentioned the concern, and hopefully there has been some, you know, some discussions regarding the revival of cricket in the parish of St. David in particular. And I wanted to just spend a little time on that, because you mentioned at the start your favorite sport has still been cricket. And definitely we know that probably 10, 15 years ago, lots of cricket being played at the community level. We had the St. David's Cricket League. We had the St. Andrews Cricket League in particular. And they basically carried cricket in Grenada. Most of our national players and even former national players who have even gone on to play Windward Islands cricket in particular came from these parishes. As Prime Minister, and particularly the Member of Parliament for St. David, how you think you may be able to inspire those folks in your parish in particular to revive cricket?
Well, let me say this, that I don't think I need to inspire them. I think they really are committed to reviving cricket. I've met with several of them, and they've all pledged their support to do so. Many of them are, in fact, to some extent held back by the lack of resources and by the failure of, and I'm saying the government here, meaning previous governments as well as our government, because we've been 18 months in office, and obviously we have to put ourselves in a position where we can now support those initiatives. And I certainly look forward to our government doing so in 2024. So I could start with a couple of things. We need to, I think, start basically by ensuring that we can have cricket played at the primary schools, the secondary schools, and then that we have a club structure that can take them certainly coming out of the secondary schools. So that structure has to be put back in place. I think we're fortunate in St. David that to have a lot of the persons who know how to do this, who are keen and excited about doing this. I've mentioned Ray Duncan as an example, to make sure that can be done. On my own personal level, I've actually started working with a group of volunteers who've created an NGO called Joy's Cricket School. They are conducting classes every Saturday in Laura, St. David's. We are targeting for the moment 3 primary schools, St. Teresa's, St. Dominic's, and Current Government. We hope to move this to Malmont to cover the other primary schools in the northern part of St. David's Catholic, St. Joseph RC, and to some extent Crochet RC as well, although Crochet is not strictly speaking in St. David. The idea here is, and I'm making this point, we don't intend to teach the children to play softball or tennis ball cricket. We want them to learn, in fact, all of the techniques of hardball cricket, which is really what the professional sport is. The idea is that if we can get up to 100 kids, 200 kids playing cricket regularly during the summer, during the Easter break, on Saturdays, that by the time they get into secondary school, they will be familiar with the technique, they will be comfortable with the type of gear that is required, and all of the things that the discipline, particularly the mental and the need to be physically fit, to ensure that by the time they get into secondary school, cricket becomes a normal, routine part of their lives. And it is boys and girls, not just boys. So that is critical as well, because we want to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible. The clinic is free. The kids don't have to pay. We are fortunate to be working with a lot of partners who've helped, whether it's donating water bottles, whether it's persons in the community coming out and ensuring the kids have a snack, whether it's working with persons who drive the bus around and pick them up and bring them in. As you know, Ray, perhaps for the last 40 years or so, has been intimately involved in cricket. He has his own camp at Lasajas every Saturday. That camp feeds students from all over Grenada, not just St. David. So we want to make sure that Ray has, and people like Ray, Junior Murray, and others who've had their camps, that they in fact have a large pool of persons coming out of primary school that can then feed into the secondary school and then into the club structure. Now, the club structure is a major problem because to a large extent that has collapsed. But we believe that once we're able to build the primary school and then build the secondary school, and if we have competitions amongst the secondary schools in St. David and St. Andrew, for example, because St. David's only has 2 secondary schools. But we can start by having, in a sense, competition amongst the houses for cricket within the secondary schools. And then from there, we can certainly go amongst the secondary schools, even if we start with only St. David and St. Andrew and then spread this nationally. And then we think by the time that happens, we would easily be in a position to have semi-professional and even professional players going on to join clubs. The beauty about cricket now is that it's truly internationalized and truly professionalized. And so the opportunity for you to be scouted, the opportunity for you to go straight into a semi-professional or professional cricket club is there. What we have to do from a government level is make sure that we can protect our students, protect our young talent by giving them the support, giving them the legal advice and so on, so that when they get to the semi-professional stage, they have the right counselors, right advisors to make sure they make the right choices. But we can't get to that point if people are not playing cricket in the primary or secondary school. So, in a sense, with the national cricket group has to essentially be revived, but you can't be revived if there is no cricket and if there's nothing for you to administer. And right now, to a large extent, and I'm not apologetic about saying so, there's really, to a large extent, nothing for them to administer because cricket is not being played. So if they really want to become effective, it basically means they have to join with us and support the persons who've given their life, blood, and all their time and effort to keeping cricket alive at the grassroots communities.
Okay, right. And Prime Minister, if at any point a question is thrown at you and you want to defer it to the sports minister, who hopefully will, come at some point later on, then, feel free to let us know,
I was going to say to you when you had me on that, to a large extent, the first interview should really be with perhaps the outgoing Minister for Sports and the incoming Minister for Sports, because I think from a more technical, detailed point of view, obviously they would be, particularly from a ministerial perspective, they would be more familiar than I am.
I fully understand that and agree.
But follow immediately with them.
Yeah, towards the end of the program, we'll understand why. But I support that. But at the same time, I am certain you will feel comforted that Hazel, well, we know as Hazel and Regis, is saying good morning, PM Mitchell. Great having you on here, wherever she is now. Yeah, it's morning time, and certainly is one who you have been speaking about, who would have had St. David dear in her heart, but probably from St. Andrew, because she attended the St. David's Catholic Secondary School, but certainly, that's where you're talking about the crochet in particular, and things like that. I think Hazel is from St. Andrew, but you will believe that she's
once you go to St. David, you don't go back.
Yeah, that's certainly. And good morning, Kellon. Well, Kellon and Twine, somewhere in the US, I think. Kellon is saying, Sports in Grenada is in safe hands. All can rest assured that our beloved PM and his team will do all on their capacity to boost the sports in our trial and state. All hands on deck. Thank you, Kellon. Rudian, you had something to ask the PM?
Yeah. You speak of getting back cricket into the houses in school. Is it something that your administration going to target with the Ministry of Sports and the Ministry of Education, so that all schools can have that? Because almost all secondary school have a house system. So is it and I know some of the schools, when I went to Magna College, I don't remember cricket playing, but I know we had soccer and other sports definitely play within the house leagues. So it is something that you guys looking to target in this new year, that to see that all schools have that sort of system going on, that sports is being played within a house system, and that way teams can be picked to be selected on a school team and they can move on and play in other sports. And how does the parish council, sports council, play a part in that?
So the answer is yes. I don't know that it will be roll out nationally initially, because I think it's important for us to pilot and test and then measure, and then if we find it successful, to then roll out throughout all of the schools. But I certainly can say the house system, in my mind, is a structure that's there, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And so having cricket played, well, first, I think not just played, but I think the training is important at the primary level, at the secondary school level, within the house structure, in my view, something that's pretty straightforward and can be easily accomplished. And as I said, we already have proposals from people like Ray Duncan, specific to St. David's, to work to ensure that we can get this back and running. And I'm sure once it works out successfully, we should then be able to pilot it in St. Andrew, St. Patrick, some of the parishes that more traditionally have played a lot of cricket. And that's why, in a sense, having the parish sports council, I think, is critical, because one of the challenges you would find is that we can't simply just rely on our teachers, who oftentimes are already pretty heavily burdened, to be able to organize and provide the support and logistics for events such as coordinating competitions or training sessions, particularly after school or on the weekends. And so having a parish sports council, which can drive volunteerism, which can drive the organization, the logistics, the mobilization of resources, and so on, the scheduling and booking of the fields, because we tend to use all our fields for the same thing. We don't have any fields that are specific to any particular type of sport. So the same field that does cricket does soccer, and sometimes they're not always compatible, especially in the periods where we have significant rain. And many of our fields also double as entertainment centers. So we have to factor that in as well. So having the parish sports council, which really should be administering sports within the parishes and ensuring that its sports administration is decentralized and so more efficient and more flexible and more responsive to the needs of the individual parishes would be key to that. Because some parishes, as you know, are perhaps over time and over history and over experience have honed certain expertise. So you'd certainly appreciate that, for example, cricket and track are very well, in a sense, St. David have become sort of synonymous with that. St. Andrew, you would find perhaps football, is perhaps more widely played in St. Andrews because of the strength of some of the clubs up there. And we can look at each parish and you'd see their unique features. Swimming, for example, is dominated to a large extent by St. George's or the schools in St. George's simply because of the fact that they have access to facilities and so on. So I think having a parish council that can be more effective at administering sports is one such thing. But also the parish council, I think, would be able to highlight and reinforce the strengths of any given parish, or as well look at the weaknesses and then make sure that we can take steps to address the particular weaknesses in that particular parish.
And then, Prime Minister, the whole issue of the success of some of those non-traditional sports. Rugby, for example, is an example that really had I would say, is having an impact on sports tourism. Will we see an expansion to include other sports like beach volleyball, something you mentioned in our last program, for example, as part of the expansion in terms of tourism, sports tourism, and the non-traditional sports in particular?
Well, certainly, I think in a sense for the sports tourism, the Ministry of Tourism has been quite keen to bring in non-traditional sports, particularly non-traditional sports that have an international following and that have players as well as fans or supporters who travel to support these types of sports. So rugby is one such beach football as well as beach volleyball are also others. But to a large extent, football obviously is another one, although it's more traditional. So I think from a tourism perspective and from a perspective of the sports administrators, whether it's GFA, whether it's any of those other entities, working together to see how we can bring clubs, teams, fans and supporters integrating so that we can host, beginning with perhaps one-off matches, but over time building a regular schedule or calendar of such events is one such thing. The other spin-off from this is that by introducing new sports, Grenadians get exposed to them, and persons who hitherto would not have perhaps been interested in playing a particular sport can certainly go on to learn and be exposed to it, and perhaps over time we can then build the culture of these non-traditional sports also extending to Grenada. So certainly in my experience in the Caribbean, Trinidad perhaps and Barbados to a lesser extent are two areas where some measure of rugby is played, but purely on a very, very amateur level. None really, certainly during my lifetime, has ever been played in Grenada. So one way of introducing a sport obviously is via the tourism way. But over time, if it's sustained, then there's an opportunity for us to also learn and adopt that sport as well.
Mm-hmm. And just talking about sports there on that level, are you concerned that there is a sort of decline in some of the sporting disciplines in Grenada?
Well, certainly, I'm concerned that there is a general decline in physical activity in Grenada, one.
Okay.
Two, I'm concerned that certainly in our traditional sports, we've perhaps just relied on talent rather than on the need to professionalize the sport. And then three, I think oftentimes a lot of our sport administrators sometimes have become caught up with their own self-importance rather than with the need to serve the sport. And to a large extent, we've built, if you survey it, we've built a lot of concrete, a lot of infrastructure. Many of the sport administrations or administrative or groups or bodies, whatever you want to call them, have pretty nice buildings, far nicer than when I was growing up. But do we have nicer fields? That's questionable. Are we producing better and superior athletes? That's questionable as well. And are we keeping the nation healthy, which is part of, I think, the sport mandate in terms of ensuring that people in schools, when they leave schools, remain active and involved, not just in playing, but in supporting, coaching, in taking up opportunities for other careers like refereeing and so on. I am not so sure. I think the jury's out on this. So to me, if you ask me, for example, is football stronger in Grenada or has it been strong over the last 5-10 years compared than 10, 15, 20 years ago? That's highly debatable. So that's the challenge. I think for us to measure the growth, to me, the growth has to be the success of our players, both semi-professionally, professionally, and the success of our national teams or individual national athletes. I think there's some areas where we undoubtedly have improved and grown significantly. Track is probably the standout area, and to a large extent, I should say track and field. And that is due mostly to the athletes and mostly to the coaches, who almost single-handedly, as I've said, with very little support in many instances, before they become stars or celebrities, have gone about their business quietly and have been able to achieve. But I think if you look at swimming is perhaps an exception as well. I think the Grenada Amateur Swimming Association has done a wonderful job with very limited infrastructure. And certainly at the OECS level, our swim team have performed exceptionally well. In cricket, we have obviously individual players who've done well, but I think systematically as a Grenada cricket team, we haven't really done, I think, as well as we can, and that's perhaps reflected also in the Windward Islands and by extension, West Indies cricket. Similarly, from a football perspective, there are individual footballers who've done well and have managed to be able to play outside of Grenada. But as a Grenada football team, I think it'd be difficult to say that we feel, at least my perspective, that we are better today than we were 15 or 20 years ago. So I think that's some of the challenges that we face. So I'm not clear if, in many instances, our administrators have specific goals themselves or 3 or 5 year plans as to what it is they're trying to achieve, and how they plan to go about it and how we partner with the government. Oftentimes, the requests are sort of reactionary or ad hoc or last minute for help here or help there or provide money there. But the sense that there's a general plan or direction in which we're going, I think we all have to spend a lot more time talking through that aspect of it. And that's why I think the sports policy is important, because obviously it can set out the government's perspective and the government's policy on many of those issues. And hopefully before that is finalized, we continue to have some, in a sense, final engagement with all the relevant stakeholders with the hope that we can finalize this certainly by the first quarter of this year.
Okay. I wouldn't want to be selfish because certainly there are some comments that are coming in. So Prime Minister, I'll just read some of them to you. Hazel is saying, chess is another area of interest, I believe, will be very beneficial to youths. Brandon Lewis, decentralization in all areas is needed to create good athletes and products to offer to the world. And Kim Fullerton is saying, how can we source expertise of individuals in the diaspora that can help redesign the structural changes necessary to develop our talents? Most of the current traditional structures need changes. And it's a good segue for my question in terms of the role you think the diaspora can play in the support structure of local sports, Prime Minister.
Well, I can start by saying, the diaspora is already playing a significant role, and there are a lot of unsung heroes up there who, to a large extent, help many of our Grenadian athletes to educate themselves first and foremost by getting them partial or sometimes full scholarships based on their sporting talent. There are people like Alejandro Robert. I want to take the opportunity to give him a shout out, who've quietly helped many Grenadian students, including students who are currently in university, and he's seeking to help others to come to the US to further their education and obviously to continue to improve their prowess in sports. So there are many Grenadians who are doing this and who continue to support students and sports athletes who otherwise would not be able to even get, in a sense, a university education. And that's one obvious way. I think what we have to do is take a more structured approach where we can partner, where they partner with the government and with the various sporting associations that could develop predictable budgets, clear guidelines as to what or how the students qualify, what are the expectations of the students, and what is the budgetary allocation that's associated with this. Currently, it's a bit ad hoc, and in a sense, all of us, including the government, is scrambling many times to address those issues. So I think having, as part of the sports policy, a clear structure, clear goals, clear objectives, clear verification of who the Grenadians in the diaspora that are reputable, that are well-meaning, that have the connections and the expertise to get our students into university and to ensure that they can continue their sports training and prowess is one such obvious way. And I'm certainly keen to make sure that we can put in place a structure to do so. So that's one of the issues that I think certainly the new Minister of Sports and his team would be tasked with. as well as any of the partners in Grenada, such as the National Lottery Authority and others, who may have resources that the government would not have to be able to put the structure in place for this. But it's also crucial because oftentimes, or not often, sometimes I should say, or athletes and students get these opportunities, go overseas, and they themselves don't give back or help the very people who brought them there to strengthen the programs and to strengthen the institutional framework to make sure that the next set of Grenadians get an opportunity to do so. And so that's one way is obviously. I mean, the second area obviously is to the point that Kim made. Some of the structures that we have don't work simply because, to a large extent, traditionally sport was viewed from an amateur perspective rather than a professional perspective. It was not viewed as a career. So in a sense, while you might be very good at school or up to school level, to a large extent thereafter, your sporting career would have come to a screeching halt and you go look for a job. So I think what we probably would certainly need assistance with, and I think the diaspora is well placed to do so, is the fact that to a large extent, it's known very early that sports is a career in the US. And so the structures are in place. The infrastructure is in place. They need to understand that when you're talking with athletes, regardless of what area of discipline, you need to have advisors, you need to have persons who can help you with your nutrition, you need to have persons who can help you with remaining healthy, persons who can help you with the whole drug policy. Because obviously, if you're an athlete, you can't just go and buy over-the-counter drugs and take them for sickness and so on, and because obviously there's doping and anti-doping policies in place. So I think a lot of those non-traditional issues that are now very relevant to athletes and sports in general, which traditionally would not have applied because we were taking an amateur approach. Those are areas that we would need, legal counsel, what sort of sporting contracts, marketing contracts, sponsorship, what are the do's and don'ts, who owns the intellectual property to your images, to the things you say, to what you can endorse, those kinds of things. How can we ensure that some of our amateurs get financial support and work sponsorship deals with international outfits on the basis that they may be young but unknown, but you see talent there, you see the possibility of the person becoming a star, and how do you channel that through the appropriate international sporting companies that look to sponsor talent and perhaps look to grab them up early. So I think a lot of those non-amateur but professional issues, which we would not have had to grapple with previously, is something that the diaspora can help with. What happens to the athletes after they finish their athletic career? Many athletes just simply think about their athletic career and then don't appreciate that to a large extent. Most sports, you probably don't go beyond 30 or 35, and then you basically have the rest of your life ahead of you. How do you ensure that you understand financial and investment management? How do you make plans for your sporting retirement? What disciplines can you go in, whether it's coaching, whether it's physiotherapy, whether it's sports commentary, whether it's writing, whether it's, all of those areas, sports nutrition, to make sure that all of these careers are seen as normal routine careers. So I think, in a sense, the diaspora is exposed to that because to a large extent, all sports is professionalized in North America. That includes Canada and in Europe and London. So what are the emerging frontiers, Africa, the Middle East? What are the emerging trends in terms of which sports are growing? Cricket in India and the Asian continent, for example. Cricket is now going to be played in North America. So I think I've cited all of those things that basically say I think there's a significant role that the diaspora can help in terms of assisting us with addressing those emerging and non-traditional issues.
Mm-hmm. And let's just shift gear a bit, Prime Minister, because there's some level of attention to Grenada, your leadership in particular, and rightly so in terms of youthfulness and things. So CARICOM has set up a cricket committee. We have not heard much about this committee in recent times, but how do you think, or do you think that CARICOM should expand that committee to include sports in general and not just cricket, looking at sports at the CARICOM level?
Well, I think, someone told me yesterday a committee is a way to say you're not going to get anything done. So I want to say that, yes, CARICOM must, and I think our leaders appreciate that sport is an area that we have performed well in, but we've underappreciated the significance, both socially, economically, and I think politically, of sport in general. And I could take a simple example that I think the athletes from Jamaica, the track athletes, market Jamaica more than any ad that the Jamaican Tourism Authority or the Jamaican Tourism or the Jamaican government could issue inviting people to come to Jamaica. So that in and of itself, I think, tells you the link and the power of sport to, in a sense, a country's identity and economic prowess. So I think if what I don't think has really happened is there has not been perhaps a systematic review or an analysis of the impact of sport on the Caribbean and the relationship between our economic development and growth and our identity and sport. And whether it's cricket, whether it's track, whether it's football, whether it's swimming or any other areas, I think we really do have an opportunity. Well, first of all, we clearly punch way above our weight per capita compared to most regions of the world. We won perhaps more world and Olympic medals than many countries, several times our size and economic prowess. So I think the fact is we have an opportunity to export as well to, for example, our motherland Africa. A lot of our techniques, our coaches, our legends, our heroes, to help them develop. And these things could be done in a manner that's economically beneficial to us. So given, for example, the enormous capacity Jamaica has in terms of coaches, track coaches, and so on, Jamaica should really be leveraging these coaches to have people from Africa and other countries come to Jamaica so that they can train and be coached there, etc. So I think one major area of our economic development that we can certainly leverage is the use of sports to ensure that happens. So it's not just the revival of cricket for nostalgia or for pride, but it's really for economic development. I think we can appreciate that there are more economic opportunities from playing cricket today than there's ever been, and certainly more than during the time of our legends by far. Yet still, per capita, we are probably producing less international stars than during the heyday of our legends. And the question is why? And I think it goes back to the question of the grassroots and so on. Sports is repetition. If you're not playing it, you can't be successful at it. It's as simple as that. If you don't have large numbers participating, you can't be successful at it. So I think the key issue is here, we can't talk about sports in an academic sense. If we talk about track, we understand why we're successful in track. All of our schools here take part. Intercol is perhaps the single biggest event on the island, rivaling our carnival or soca mona competition, etc. It's a big deal, and it's why we produce athletes. We have, there are challenges with it, but we obviously have coaching systems. We have clubs that feed track and field. People are excited about it. Young people support it. They go to cheer on their stars, their athletes, their schools. That's why it's worked. So if you want a similar thing to happen with other areas, you have to invest at the school level and at the club level and nationally in those other areas. And the same applies to CARICOM as well.
Okay. So Prime Minister, I just want you to spare me a couple seconds and you listen to this piece from Mr. Mike Sands, who is the president of NACAC, North American, Central American, and Caribbean Athletic Associations. He is basically throwing it out to Caribbean leaders regarding a regional symposium to talk about sports.
I've had a discussion with two ministers of the Caribbean while in Jamaica. I mean, while in Budapest. And my thing is this, right? I want sports to become a CARICOM subject. Because, we talk about this, we talk about that, but I don't hear sports on the agenda. And I coined the phrase that I said to those ministers, I want us to have sports against violence. In other words, we have to buy into what we're trying to do and invest on the front end with these young people. We're not just talking track and field now, because we're talking about, I want to see us come together as a diaspora, and CARICOM has to help lead the charge, because at the end of the day, the athletes from Grenada have to go to the government for funds. Jamaica, the government for funds, right? Bahamas. I mean, so we probably need to have a sports symposium, okay, for the Caribbean or the CARICOM to determine what we can do to by extension, have sports be part and parcel of the solution, or at least a contribution to try to get our kids in more positive direction. And the travel always comes to my mind, because I know the pain that countries face when they're traveling for competition, not just for track and field, but for sports. And so I want to have that as a subject somewhere along the line at a higher level, with some strategic plan as to how we can help offset some of this cost and make it an investment in our young people, and by extension, better nations within our diaspora.
So, Prime Minister, that's Mike Sands on our program a few months ago, and up to this point in time, I don't think anyone has really taken up the challenge. Is it something you think you're willing to further, something Grenada can pioneer? It's our 50th anniversary. Is it something you think you can give some consideration to, Prime Minister?
Yes, and I think it's more than consideration. We go to Guyana in February to our annual CARICOM Heads of Conference meeting. Guyana assumes the chairmanship of CARICOM in February. I'm certainly President Ali and myself are part of what we call the 40+ club. President Ali is an avid sports fan. I will also give myself that title, and so I certainly Grenada assumes the chairmanship in July. So I certainly think I can do more than give consideration to, and certainly in my role as a CARICOM head, and given that we will be assuming the chairmanship of CARICOM in July, I'm certainly prepared to work with President Ali from now to bring this issue on the agenda. I can tell you there are times when the West Indies performs badly, and it is exceedingly painful for some of our heads where cricket has been a great tradition. So I certainly think the recommendation of Mr. Sands is of significant merit, and it's something that should squarely be on our agenda, because you may recall that not too long ago in Trinidad, we had a symposium describing public safety and crime as a public health hazard. Very much the same way that the COVID-19 pandemic and other pandemics and epidemics are. And I think the reasoning is obvious. I mean, if you see what's going on in Trinidad, Jamaica, the Bahamas, St. Lucia, and Grenada, regrettably, has not been spared in recent times with the increased level of gun violence and shootings. We have to find all means necessary to create public safety, to create public confidence, and basically to ensure that our young persons do not become victims of crime, violence. So the recommendations and the suggestions, I think, are exceedingly full of merit. They're on point, and it's something that I'm certainly prepared to champion as we go forward. But I always want to say this: we can't just have talk shops, symposiums, meetings. We talk, everybody says the right thing, and then we go back and nothing gets done. And that's why I go back to things like the grassroots, because if kids are playing sports early, from primary school, it teaches them all of the values we need to make sure that they don't become victims or perpetrators of violence or crime. If you have aggression, if you have pent-up passion, let's go play football, let's go play cricket, let's go play volleyball. We can take it out there on the field. It teaches you teamwork, cooperation, discipline, being on time, taking care of yourself. Really, all of the tools you need to become a valued and valuable and contributing member of your society, you can learn through sports. And you can obviously have a career and do very well, and then get the opportunity to give back to your communities as well. So I completely agree with him on this.
Okay. We have so many comments coming in, but there's one that says, I love it, Clev Deputy is saying, sports against violence, theme that should be adopted as a CARICOM baby, and that governments can feed and nurture into adulthood. Patrick Sim, well said, PM. Lots of comments on the board, but Prime Minister, let me ask you regarding, Chenny is saying, Chenny Joseph, sports provides a pathway that can change lives, economies, and situations. It's good to hear what the PM says, but discussions must also be on a CARICOM Sports Secretariat leading the charge beyond those CARICOM heads of government meetings. And Prime Minister, do you think there's a possibility for a CPL franchise for Grenada? I hope it's not a curveball I'm bowling.
No, the answer is yes. Just you may not be aware, but when we assumed office in June, we actually held pretty extensive discussions with one of the CPL teams to move to Grenada. Obviously, the stadium is under repairs, will be under repairs once the independence celebrations are over. The estimated time for repairs is 18 months, and that was 18 months as of August last year. The repairs were delayed, obviously, in order to facilitate things like the cricket, which took place in December, and the independence activities. So I'm still hoping that the 18-month period will hold from February. We also intend to light the stadium. That was actively on the discussions as well. even pre the repair stage. So we certainly want to use the 18-month where the physical renovations will be done to try and ensure that we can have the lighting of the stadium occur at that point in time. Now, I speak to those two physical infrastructure developments or improvements because obviously once that is completed, it puts us in a position to ensure that we can be part of the CPL program because obviously the games are played evening into nights or sometimes only at nights. And if you don't have night lights, you can't do so. We, as you may be aware, several of the CPL teams are in fact owned by Indian franchises that play in the IPL. So we certainly think there's an opportunity for us to have a CPL team, and preferably if it's owned by Grenadians or Grenadians in the diaspora, that would be more welcome. But the truth is, we are committed to supporting having a CPL team come to Grenada. But obviously, we also want to make sure that when we are negotiating, that it's a win-win situation and it's not a lopsided arrangement. Because obviously, we own the stadium. If we put in the lights, it's an investment we are making. We similarly want the teams to come and invest as well, not just in the games themselves, but in the overall development of cricket and sport on the island. So those are things we would work through with them. So certainly we are committed to doing so. You may be aware as recently as the last EPL, actually journeyed to St. Kitts at the invitation of the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots owners. Grenada's Spiceman, as he's called, Andre Fletcher, played for that team. And it was through Andre that I made the introduction through the owners. And so, in a sense, they've given me significant insight, I think, into the back-end aspects of the CPL. And so we will certainly be in discussions with any person who are interested in having a CPL team. And that's why I'm throwing out, in a sense, an encouragement to Grenadians in the diaspora who have sufficient financial backing for us to look at how we can have discussions with Grenada to have a CPL team in Grenada, preferably owned by Grenadians.
Yes, well said. So many comments there, and but I just want to stick on one issue as it relates to the regional international Prime Minister. We have the Windward Island Secondary School Games, for example, and I know you spoke of CARICOM, but let's look at the sub-region, the OECS. Wouldn't you think it's an idea that can probably an expansion to include the OECS, because we just have the Windward Islands, nothing for the Leeward Islands. But is it possible to expand this event to include the OECS? And is something you think that our sub-regional leaders would probably buy into, barring the cost factors, Prime Minister, accommodation and transportation in particular?
Well, my answer is yes. I'm sure you remember the days of Red Spur. We once had an OECS sports desk that was very, very active and that drove a lot of the initiatives that are still legacy initiatives when it comes to OECS sports within the region. So I certainly think it's an easy ask to expand the games to the OECS. I don't see these things as cost. I see these things as investments. We just have to plan it properly and do it at the appropriate time. So, for instance, you certainly wouldn't want to hold these games during the traditional winter season in any of these islands, because that's when all of the hotels and so on are taken by tourists and so on. But once school goes out, for example, in the summer, almost to a T, all of the OECS islands, their tourism plan becomes available because occupancy drops tremendously during the summer. And so having the games during the summer in any of the islands, in my view, becomes logistically more easy. You create economic activity in that particular island. It could obviously happen on a rotating basis. We foster OECS unity, because once you start meeting other students, other athletes, other persons at a very young age from other islands in the OECS, you quickly realize how similar we are. You quickly realize we have a shared culture, shared history, shared language, shared political system, shared currency, shared judiciary. And it really fosters the continued movement of people within the OECS for the rest of their career. So to me, I really don't see any negatives from expanding from Windward Islands to OECS Islands. And in fact, it should become quite easy, because the Windward Islands are, in fact, the large islands and more populous. And so including Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, should not be a big deal. In fact, I would say we should go as far as the British Virgin Islands and so on. So from that perspective, I certainly think it's a good idea. But again, it goes back to the point Chenny also made. It's all well and good for me to say that. It's all well and good for you to say that. But if we don't have the institutional framework set up, and if we don't resource it, because we believe truly that sports has the ability to transform, and crucially is a normal economic activity. I think that has to be reinforced. Then it would not work. So I certainly think it is something that we should pursue at the OECS level, and I'm prepared to take it up as well.
Okay, as we get ready to wrap up, Rudian, I think you may have a question there. We have so many comments there, but the Prime Minister is so busy, and I assume he wants to get out in the community again this Saturday. Rudian?
Certainly. I just want to go back to the grassroots for one sec. We talk about you want the grassroots to grow, especially starting with the elementary school, the high school, even within the community. But one of the areas that is really lacking is the coaches and coaching levels. How does the Ministry of Sports, with the Ministry of Education, have some sort of level of coaching, so that coaches have some sort of qualification? Because we want the kids to learn proper. And if the coaches themselves don't have the proper understanding of what a coach should be, then it's kind of hard to move forward and getting the quality coming out from the athletes as we wish for them.
Right. So, I would say two things. One, there are some coaches who are qualified in various fields, and I think really the onus, to some extent, is on us to make sure that we can, in fact, pay permanently, not in an ad hoc, sometime-ish manner, but on a permanent basis, these coaches to work within the schools and make sure that we have clear deliverables in terms of what we expect out of them, what the targets, what the objectives are. I think that's one. And then second, we obviously have to invest more in ensuring that we can have the coaches certified, have them undergo training on a continuous basis, so that, as you said, the students and athletes are taught properly. So that part, I certainly think we, the government, can play a significant and meaningful role in. But also it's important and that's where I think the culture shift has to come. If we don't see sport as a normal career, if we don't see coaching as a normal career, then it becomes, again, an amateur type approach. And we have to be able to say, I'm pursuing training or education in a particular field of sports as a coach, because we, the country, have to be in a position to then remunerate that coach so that that coach doesn't worry about how he makes a living or how he earns a living. So that's part of what we have to address, I think, at a government level as well, if we're going to take a systematic approach to making sure that we have the right coaches, we have persons who are certified, and that they can go on and coach our students. I mean, resources are always finite and limited, and that's why we have to have, in a sense, a strategic policy. What are the sports that we are targeting? Which sports do we want to become mainstream? And because we feel there are economic opportunities and other opportunities associated with it. And if we identify three, we can't do everything. We can't do skiing and bobsledging and those things. So if we identify that our strengths are in track and field, or soccer, or cricket, because we feel either because of historical traditional patterns, emotional ties, because of economic opportunities, because of the size of the industries in this, whether it's soccer, cricket, etc., and we're pursuing this, then obviously we should then invest in ensuring we have sufficient coaches, etc., etc. For those that are perhaps just starting out, you may find, okay, you may have to let it start without coaches or with only one or two coaches initially until you get to the point that we grow. So again, I think that's where we go back to the sports policy, because if you don't have a policy, if you don't have a strategic direction, if you don't have clearly defined goals and objectives, then we would just be reactive, unplanned, oftentimes perhaps wasting resources because we're not engaging in a sustained policy initiative.
And also, just before you go, in Grenada, I think one of the things that can be strong, that keep the nation together, is parish competition. That's where the parish council coming in. And is it part of your administration to see that all the parishes have sporting and they have competitions? That can really, build a parish together. So you have more parish teams now, a netball team, basketball team, soccer team, even going to volleyball, because like I said, we have the beach. We don't need to buy sand. We have it already to kind of put everything together, to create that. And I really think you could bring community together, bring a parish together, bring people together. Where do you stand on that moving forward?
No, I agree with you. In fact, that's the whole reason for having the parish councils. Because we recognize, in the absence of having that structure in place, you never have parish activities either internally or amongst the parishes themselves. And so to some extent, it's going back to what once obtained and what would have actually at that time created stronger sporting communities and initiatives to attend to. And those things, again, linked to the social and behavioral patterns of our young people in particular.
Yeah.
And again, if we are saying, young people are the future, which obviously is the truth, we have to make sure that we put the necessary infrastructure in place, the necessary policies, and the necessary institutions that will ensure that these young persons have the opportunity to take part in, amongst other things, sporting activities and initiatives. And again, that structure can be replicated across all initiatives, all social initiatives, not just sports, but music, culture, the performing arts, debate. We can go on and on, politics, etc. So I think that's crucial to have some level of decentralized. I think one of the challenges we've had over the years is that everything goes through the botanical gardens, as I said.
Yeah.
And the response time oftentimes is just way too slow. Sometimes there's just no response. So we have to find ways to empower districts, empower parishes, to make sure that those initiatives that you described can take place.
Okay. Prime Minister, as we get ready to wrap up now, there was something that was asked earlier, and it has to do with security. Speaking about Independence, Carifta Games, a lot of visitors coming in. Security must be paramount. Anything in place to utilize the SSU unit to assist the Royal Grenada Police Force to ensure safety and security, and as Minister of National Security as well.
Yeah. Right. So the SSU is part of the RGPF.
Right. Well, it's the paramilitary aspect. Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call it paramilitary, but it is part of the RGPF, and so it's a whole of police, but not just police in a sense. The whole of the national security apparatus, including NADMA, that is part of that. So the answer is yes. We are confident that the RGPF, in conjunction with the Ministry of National Security, in conjunction with all our partners, because when we talk security, we're talking port, we're talking airport, we're talking RGPF, we're talking customs, we're talking NADMA, we're talking our health and safety as well. So yes, a whole of government approach is we're talking fire, the fire department, which is part of the RGPF. So it's a whole of government approach to ensuring public safety and safety of the venues, safety of the persons partaking, whether as athletes or spectators in the events and independence celebrations as well.
Okay. Lydia is saying, Lydia probably joined late. Did this PM play cricket? I know his father was a great cricketer. PM, but you didn't mention that. That's where you got some of the little cricket thing from.
Yes, my father was a great cricketer, but I wasn't a great cricketer.
Right. Finally, Prime Minister, as we wrap up there now, the GIS, okay, covering most sporting events, and your thoughts are, dealing with information as well. And we are seeing a lack of coverage, sports coverage, from the more established media. Do you think there's a role for the GIS in covering sports? And we're looking at the issue of health and wellness in particular.
So the answer is yes. We are in the process of restructuring the Government Information Service. We conducted a review of the Government Information Service, which was done by Ernst & Young out of Jamaica. That report is now in hand. We're starting really first with the HR capacity. There has to be a significant strengthening of the HR capacity at the Government Information Service. In fact, as early as this week, we are meeting with the staff to address some of those issues. And so we intend to roll out, in a sense, the restructuring of GIS over the next year. And I think you will therefore see not just improvements in HR, but equipment, all of those things. You see, part of the challenge we face is people only look at the food and not what's going on in the kitchen. I mean, we inherited a situation where many of these government departments were under-resourced, lack of leadership, lack of meaningful engagement with the staff, no priority, no direction. What is the purpose of GIS? What is it meant to do? So all of those things are conversations that we've been engaging with. The idea really is to strengthen the GIS and make it the communication arm of the state of Grenada, so that it could particularly help with addressing some of those issues that you flagged, and not from a reactionary point of view, but crucially from a policy shaping and from an education perspective, because we have to create the reality we want. We have to create the future that we want, and information sharing and education is absolutely key to that process. So having a strong, effective, efficient, well-run, and I even would say profitable GIS, because to a large extent, we believe that when we through the restructuring, GIS would be in a position to offer services, not just to the government, but to the public at large, should help GIS itself to be in a position where it can take on things like the mass coverage of sporting events, especially those events that are of significant national or regional interest.
And finally, Prime Minister, I want to wish you all the best, but something dear to me, I want you to comment on the recent action of the Media Workers Association of Grenada, MWAG. You know, as a former president, I was a bit concerned, but what is the government's relationship with the media in Grenada? And what's about media policy, and is it something you will support?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for the government. I would say our relationship is excellent. I think we've done nothing other than try to support the media. You would appreciate, Michael, I've never criticized the media in prior to getting into government or coming. I recognize that there are significant challenges facing the media. I'll take a simple example as that of training. A lot of the workers are hired just like how you hire any worker straight out of school or straight out of TAMCC, and you get thrown straight into writing, coverage, editing, what have you. I mean, you can't become a lawyer, doctor, sportscaster, etc., without training or without the appropriate understanding of the theoretical basis upon which you're doing what you're doing, and then the practical basis. Many of the props across the board, media workers are not paid well. We can go on and on. So there are significant issues within the media fraternity that needs to be addressed from our end. That is part of the reason we are leading with the restructuring of GIS to improve the terms and conditions that staff work under, to improve the payments, the salaries, etc., that they get, to address basic things like uniforms, etc., to significantly improve the equipment and to make sure we provide training opportunities for them. So we recognize the need to support the media. There are certain policy initiatives that we would certainly be embarking upon in terms of how we guide the relationship between the state and the media. As you're aware, we recently held a bit of a Christmas brunch for the media. And the sole reason for doing so was, in fact, to ensure that the media appreciates that we are not here to intimidate them. We are not here to shut them down. We are not here to exclude. We actually want to engage with them because we see their role in educating the public, in holding government accountable, in holding state bodies accountable as absolutely key. So we are not afraid of being held accountable. We are not afraid of being asked the questions. I'm sure there are times when we will disagree. There are times when there will be misunderstanding. We've never boycotted the media. What's the point of doing that? We, as the government, have to be able to tell our story. We have to be able to get information out. We have to be able to make sure the public understands what we're doing, and the media is one key asset in doing that. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't criticize us. I welcome criticisms any day. I welcome a debate any day. If at the end of the debate we accept that your position is superior to us, we are happy to adjust accordingly. We certainly, in fact, one media worker asked whether we were committed to a Freedom of Information Act. We said yes. We did have a formal sit down with the executive members of the media last year, and we spoke about some of those very initiatives like the Freedom of Information Act. I'm subject to correction, but I don't recall the media pushing or even being aggressive on the issue. So we want to raise the level of journalism in Grenada, bearing in mind that journalism now, with the instantaneous communication tools available to everybody, has changed dramatically. And so you would probably appreciate that traditional media is almost extinct. It's almost becoming a dinosaur. It's a very dynamic field. Everybody could become a reporter with a phone. The question, though, is how do you ensure that what you're doing is accurate? How do you ensure that people are not feeding you fake images? Do you have the tools and the skill set yourself to do those kinds of things? We would like to encourage more investigative journalism, for example. Who's really doing that? Who's been trained to do those things? So even in terms of scholarships, from a government perspective, we'd be happy to try and source and secure scholarships for persons who want a career in journalism to be able to do so. But as I said, the skill set needed for journalism today, I think, is dramatically different than it was 50 or 40 or 30 years ago. Newspapers don't exist anymore. You have to be able to create content, capture content, and to some extent be able to verify the accuracy of it and be able to operate in a world where news is instant and ongoing. So I would certainly say, I think as I said at the press conference, I think there was some sort of misunderstanding of what was actually happening in relation to the ministers taking their oath. The fact that we said we would have a press conference the following day is a clear indication that we were ready, willing, and planned clearly to interact with the media, and we wanted to do so in a very planned and structured way that would have given the media itself time to ask its questions properly, trying to research its questions, and be better able to have a high quality engagement rather than an on-the-cuff ad hoc arrangement. So I've given you a bit of a long-winded answer, but I hope it kind of shares our view of our relationship with the media.
Yeah, certainly, Prime Minister, and I want to thank you for even the extra minutes. But you can't go without telling me, which might be a plug to your alma mater. Are you running the old boys race on Monday? I think it's PBC's athletic.
The sports was postponed from Thursday. Let's keep
you
our
had to warm up
fingers
again.
crossed. Let's keep our fingers crossed as to the weather on Monday.
So that's a little plug for PBC.
Yes.
So folks, go out and support the guys on the hill. Well, I mean, it's my arch rival on the hill on Monday at the Roy St. John playing field. Certainly, you never know. The Prime Minister might be there. Well, not might be there. Might be doing the old boys race. So it's your opportunity. I want to thank you again, Prime Minister, and certainly we'll try to engage the Minister of Sports when he gets a little more acclimatized and some more policy issues as it relates to like the budget and all these sort of things. The national sports policy we want to do a little more on, and then hopefully we'll have a little update on the national stadium, for example, as you mentioned, a lot of work being done. We still hoping, Prime Minister, to hear something about our swimmers. The swimmers are crying out, please give us our swimming pool.
Well, we are committed to that. And I think some work has been done on that in 2024. So we are committed to supporting that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And all the folks are saying, Hazel is saying probably the PM mummy running the 4x4. Well, you never know, Hazel.
I'm a long distance man.
He says he's a long distance runner. I realize the Prime Minister tried to cozy way out. So he started off by saying he's a cricketer. Okay, so we can't expect too much of him in terms of track and field, but he's a long distance runner. He knows that there's no long distance running in old boys race, so fair enough. But we look forward to that, Prime Minister. But thank again for the engagement, and hope to see you this coming week. Hopefully.
All right.
Hope to see you
Take
this
care
coming week.
and enjoy the rest of the Saturday.
Thank you very
again,
much. Thank you. Okay then. Yeah. So Prime Minister, certainly quite a bit, Rudian, from the Prime Minister.
And we did get some of the questions we had, out, and definitely plan it properly and structure. So it was
had some more questions, but I think it's fair enough when he says the Minister of Sport in particular, I wanted to give the Minister of Sports leeway in terms of him getting as much briefing as possible, acclimatize himself. But he made a good argument in terms of probably the outgoing sports minister, but at some point in time we'll try to have them engaged, because the sports minister, the outgoing sports minister, the former sports minister, he has been on the program for a couple of times, including being on his mobile phone wherever we can find him. Karaku, he was in Karaku, he was all over, we got him. But I thought we got quite a bit. There's one thing though, Rudy, and that but I don't think the Prime Minister was in a position to give an answer because it was a developing issue, and I don't want to put him on the spot in terms of that. But I'm hoping that at some point, probably the folks from the organizing committee can give us some more information relating to the Carifta Games. I saw a report that the budget for the Carifta Games could be excess of $10 million, and I thought that could be alarming. But hopefully, and I'm not certain that they have tapped into all the sponsors and everything, but hopefully they can reach the expected target. 10 million, quite a bit. It shows that over the years that the games have probably evolved, But I'm certain when people start hearing more about that, it will be quite alarming for them in terms of the costs.
But the costs really do go up. I can recall that is it Edmonton has pull out from a major international event because of the cost.
What we are seeing with the Commonwealth Games and all
Commonwealth Games, which is the Commonwealth Games, right?
Yeah,
it was the Commonwealth Games. Yeah, it was a big cost, right? So it getting up there in the bees, right?
Yeah, what do you think about, and I don't know, I saw some of the folks were chiming in regarding that regional symposium but there were two issues in particular. The regional symposium, and I mean, it was nice to hear the Prime Minister saying about these talk shops, you know, and these setting up committees and things, but if there's no action, it doesn't really make sense. And then the
that's what I'm saying,
expansion,
right? Sometimes you hear a lot of the talking,
yeah,
but no actions, right? So
and then
yeah.
the expansion of the Windward Island Secondary School games to include probably the OECS, so make it into a larger.
Yeah.
But as I indicated, you know, the whole issue about the costs in terms of accommodation, transportation. But then the Prime Minister will say these things are investments. You know, you consider them to be investments and not so much cost, you know. And then there's the other thing as it relates to, well, his whole involvement in terms of even at the parish level, and he has been involved in this foundation and getting more young cricketers in particular to be involved in the sport. Certainly we will try to get a little more about the wellness, because they have created a new ministry as it relates to wellness. So we'll get the minister or officials to speak a little bit about that, because it's important for the health and wellness of Grenada. And people sometimes don't understand. They think it as just a cost, but then you have to look at it, yes, as a cost, because it's also costly in terms of the health sector. Yeah, because if people are not well, and if we not put an investment in wellness, it means that you're paying a lot, especially in Grenada, where healthcare is basically free. I have to say that in comparison to North America, for example, where you have to pay for just about everything, in Grenada, you can walk into a health center and, you know, be attended to. Sometimes we complain about the wait and all these sort of things, but you know, if you have to go into a health facility in the US, you have to have your insurance. You know, the first thing they ask you, well, who's really paying for that? What is it? You know, so these are the things.
Canada is no different, but yes, we have a health card, but we have those who don't have a health card still got to go through the same process too, right? So,
listen, even down to the ambulance, right? In North America, you know, you call the ambulance and you have to pay. There's a cost.
You have to pay.
It will cost, right?
And if they call the fire, there's a cost.
You know, so these are the things that we have to understand and look at in terms of wellness. When we talk about wellness, we have to ensure that you know, we encourage, especially our young people too. You know, not just sometimes we think wellness is for those in the 60s and 70s. Yeah, you know, the young people to inculcate that wellness.
Themselves who need it. Themselves who need it. Yeah.
And then he made the point about the physical education, even in the schools. You know, and then sports in particular, primary school should be the focus. And yes, he did say that, because it's not worth trying to coach people when they enter secondary schools. You know, the basics, the fundamentals.
It's challenging. Very challenging.
Yeah, as a coach, it will be challenging. They should know the basics. They should learn the basics at that level. The formative.
But they also, even at the foundation in the elementary school, you also have to be appreciated. I'm hearing a lot of the coaches who've been there for a while not being appreciated, you know, and there is nothing in place for them, and some of them is, you know, is about to retire, and you know, there's never an appreciation for those coaches for 30 years and plus years they've been doing it, and there's never appreciation for them. So sometimes something have to come in place too, right? So we have those who's doing it and they do it for nothing, you know. So definitely, yeah.
So quite a bit, and we want to thank all those folks who join us and chime in with your comments. A lot of comments there. There was the issue also that we didn't get, but I think these have to do specifically with at the ministerial level and thing. In terms of facilities, for example, you know, should we go more to covering our sporting I should say, when I say covering, more indoor facilities, as a matter of fact, especially in the context of some of the weather pattern then, okay? So some of our basketball, netball, you know, can be covered, for example, or these things can be covered to host netball, basketball, volleyball in particular. So in times of rain and inclement weather, you know, the players and fans are sheltered, if you understand where I'm talking about. So it can continue, you know, and things like that. So yeah, and in a position to host these, you know, regional and international sporting events as well. But there was also an emphasis that we see regarding the staging of the non-traditional sports. He spoke about the rugby, the beach volleyball, and things like that. So thank you very much, Rudian. Thank you very much for all. Yes, I appreciate, and hopefully we'll be on next Saturday, God's willing. Yeah.
Have a good one. Thanks again for having me on.
You're welcome. Okay. Thanks, folks, for being part of the program as per usual. I want to thank you, and hopefully next Saturday, God's willing, we'll have another guest on the program to discuss our sporting issues. All who chimed in, if you want to comment, there are a lot of comments on the box. So if you want to look at some of them and respond to them and engage, whatever it is like that. So I encourage you. I want to thank you for being part of our program and look forward to you joining us. Wherever there's sporting activities, please do. For example, at the Monrouge playing field this weekend, well, this afternoon in particular, is the Under 15, GFA Under 15 Championship. So 2 big teams in action, right? Then there's Premier League continuing later on today. Well, they have some of the games playing in the evening. And then also on Sunday, we have more Premier League football. Look on the GFA Facebook page. You'll find all the information available where the matches are being played, your teams, and you can follow all the action as well. Thank you very much, and continue supporting sports, not just football, not just cricket, not just track and field, sports in general, whatever it is, whether it's swimming, whether it's cycling, whether it's basketball, whatever it is like that. You do give our sportsmen and sportswomen all the best. Thank you very much. Do have yourself a wonderful weekend.